indylive.radio.
Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Clacks Women for Indie podcast. Music this week is from Music for Video Library on YouTube, which you can subscribe to. Again, it's copyright-free music. This one's called Victory, and I like the sound of that. This week we'll be paying our normal visit to the Clacks virtual coffee shop. We also have an update on a story that we've been following as it's evolved, which is Martin J. Keating's crowdfunded People's Case against the UK government for denying the Section 30 order. Been some unexpected developments in that this week, so we'll cover that. But first, as you know, Clacks WFIs are very good at asking questions. Last week we had questions for Leslie Riddick, and this week we had questions for Richard Walker, the editor of the Sunday National. Now, those questions were aired on a new show that's just starting on Indie Live Radio. John Drummond, who is a constitutional convention expert and has a column in the Sunday National about constitutional matters, he's got a new regular Tuesday 7 p.m. show on Indie Live Radio, TND, The Nation Talks. And his first guest was Richard Walker. And the format of that show is they have a discussion, but also you can submit questions. So we had a question for Richard, and here's how it went.
I want to interject here now and give you a question that's come through. Somebody has asked, because they've been watching, as many people have, the press conferences, the pressers that the First Minister's been doing on a regular basis. I have to say that when I compare how she performs versus our counterparts in Westminster, it's like chalk and cheese.
Yes.
However, what the questioner has pointed out is that she feels that some of the approaches by journalists are overly aggressive. Rather than trying to elicit information, she feels that the journalists perhaps go somewhat over the top.
Right.
And what's your view on that? Is that something you...
Right, your job as a journalist is you have the First Minister there, and your job is to ask relevant questions to get information that you believe your readers want or that you believe your readers need. Now, there are a range of politicians just now giving press conferences. Now, I think some of those people, I don't think Nicola Sturgeon is one of those people, but some of those people will not want to give the information, or also will have a fairly aggressive stance towards journalists. I'm thinking here of Donald Trump, who berates journalists at the conference and objects very much to being asked fairly basic, relevant questions. So journalists in that situation have to make sure that they hold Donald Trump to account and try and get him to answer the question. So I think it's difficult when you have a press conference like that to say, I'm going to have a different approach to this person than I would to that person. You need to make sure that you have a relatively consistent approach to politicians, and also to make sure that the question that you ask gets what you would consider to be a good answer. Sometimes, if you're looking at those things, you can think they're being a bit aggressive. Sometimes that's the case, but not as often as you imagine. And I don't think Nicola Sturgeon would say that she's been given too hard a time. She might say that some of the questions she might consider them to be a bit irrelevant or a bit not particularly important in the grand scheme of things. And she's quite at liberty to do that, but she nevertheless answers the questions. But she's a politician. She's a seasoned politician. She is well able to deal with some antsy journalists sometimes. And sometimes journalists have to be antsy to get the questions answered properly from politicians, not always from her. I think her press conferences are very clear, and she goes to great lengths to give the right answer. And some, I don't know how she's still standing, Nicola Sturgeon, actually, because she's got the responsibility she has, and the way she is continually on the front line and taking questions and having these conferences. I think she's doing an amazing job. But nonetheless, part of that job is to come under the scrutiny of the press. And I think they do that. The press do that in a relatively robust way. I don't necessarily think it's too robust for her. I think there is something to be said about journalists who maybe their main aim is to catch politician out or to catch the First Minister out. I don't think that's necessarily what the reader wants. I think, or the person who's watching it on television, I think what they want is to get the information. And I think the journalist's job is to make sure they get that information. And if they have to ask the question once or twice in a fairly robust way, I think that's fine. What I don't think it's their job is to try and make somebody look stupid. I think their job is to make that person, to hold them to account for what their job is.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. And I accept your point that probably Nicola Sturgeon is not any form of shrinking violet here, and she can cope. And I suspect she welcomes, I may be wrong, but my sense of it is she rather welcomes robust questioning.
Holding these press conferences to be held to account. But that's important in a free society that are held to account. She's also said that she will make mistakes, or she's probably already has made mistakes. And I think in hindsight, when you look back, sometimes you'll say, well, we could have done that a bit better. We did this well, we could have done that a bit better. And that's part of being human. People make mistakes. I think if they do, then the best thing to do is to say, in hindsight, we could have done that better. Let's move on now and make sure that we do it better next time, or we handle this better next time. And I think the press has a role to play in improving the way things are done, because it's up to them. If they are talking to a politician, if they're talking to the First Minister and their readers, or they have information which suggests something went wrong in some aspect of it, I think there's nothing to be gained by brushing it under the carpet. You have to face up to something went wrong. Let's find out what caused it, and let's make sure that we minimise the chances of it happening again. And I think that's a democratic process, and the press have a really important role to play in that.
I wonder how you feel about another aspect of it, because it seems to me that, in a sense, the press are under some pressure here now, because if you take a typical press conference like the one today, the First Minister was answering questions about an outbreak in a hotel in Edinburgh at some conference sponsored by Nike. And what struck me was how things have changed. I mean, for example, in the old days, before the pandemic, which wasn't so very long ago, journalists would go to a press conference and they would put questions, and there would be a follow-up, perhaps, or maybe two, depending on how indulgent the interviewee had to be, and then they would make notes and they would go and write their copy. Now, there's a very different aspect to it, it seems to me, which is the journalist asks the question, there's no follow-up because there's somebody else waiting. Yeah. And more importantly, because everyone has seen the press conference, it ceases to be a private matter between the media, the press, and the interviewee. You now have people who are able to go on social media and say to the journalist, this was not what she said. And by the way, here is a clip.
Or not saying what you said.
And you think, hold on a second, the last generation of journalists didn't have to go through all of this.
No, but that's good as well, because just as politicians need to be held to account, so do journalists need to be held to account. So I don't think there's anything we need to be frightened of if we're doing our jobs properly, from social media or people on social media saying that's not what happened. And famously, I guess, during the 2014 campaign, when Alex Salmond was accused of not answering a question, and social media was full of clips of him answering the question. I think social media is has become a tool by which the press are held to account as well, which is fine. Bring it on.
And that clip was from the new John Drummond show, TNT, The Nation Talks, which you can catch on Indie Live Radio with a new guest each week. Now, talking of Indie Live Radio, we're having a look at our schedules and we're trying to understand what people would like more of, what we're doing right, what else we could do that would encourage people to listen. So one of the things we've done this week, we've prepared a survey which anybody can fill in. You're welcome to do that. You can get it on indylive.radio/survey. And we've also produced our first go at a newsletter just to see if that's something that listeners might like. And you can find that on the Indie Live Radio Facebook page, and it's also on the website. If you're in a Yes group, hopefully you'll come across it because we're asking Yes groups to distribute it. So if you're in a Yes group and you've got it, please share. It would be really great to reach as many people as we can. Now, as part of the survey promotion, we've all been asked to do a little jingle. And this is the first time I've been involved in doing a jingle. And Steve B, who does the great Friday night music show, he's prepared a jingle. And I love the music on this. It transports me immediately to a desert island with a tequila in one hand and a survey form in the other. So here it is. We aim to make Indie Live Radio the best it possibly can be. But to do that, we need your help. So can we ask for just a little bit of your time and ask you to give us some feedback by taking our survey at indylive.radio/survey. We're running it to find out what you want to hear and when you want to hear it. And if you've got any ideas on how we can improve our output, then we'd love to hear those as well. That address again is indylive.radio/survey. It will only take you a couple of minutes and you would really be helping us here at Indie Live Radio. A new voice for a new Scotland. Okay, on to the case of the Scottish people versus the UK government, which, as you'll recall, I'm sure from previous episodes, this is a crowd-funded case which Martin J. Keatings has been leading on. And it is to challenge the decision of the UK government not to provide a Section 30 ruling. And the difference between this and, say, the Scottish government challenging the UK government is that everybody who's been involved in the crowdfunder is a party to the action. So it's kind of a people's thing. It's not party political. And for a quick recap on this case, on January 31st, which Brexit Day, authorisation was given to our legal counsel to write to the Advocate General, who is Westminster's lawyer, providing copies to the Scottish Government's legal department, and the Lord Advocate, who is the Scottish Government's lawyer. And the UK government was given 14 days to respond. Exactly 14 days later, the Advocate General, the UK's guy, did respond saying, "We refer to your letter. The United Kingdom's government's position is that it is outside the legislative competence of the Scottish Parliament to legislate for and hold a referendum on Scottish independence." So the next step was therefore to test that opinion in court. On the 19th of March, our legal counsel confirmed that the summons had come back from the court and it was ready to be served on the Advocate General of the UK. The question was whether to hold off doing so based on the current turmoil, and at that point they decided not to hold off at that point and to carry on. So legal counsel were formally instructed to proceed with summonsing the Advocate General of the United Kingdom and to proceed with judicial review on whether it is constitutional for the Scottish Parliament to legislate for a second referendum independently of the Union Parliament and without modifying the Scotland Act. Now, this is a question you can make an argument both ways, which is why it needs to go for a proper opinion. That meant that the summons starts a 21-day clock, which would have taken us to the 14th of April. And then on the 14th of April, they would have filed the summons with the court, and that would start a 7-day clock for the UK and Scottish ministers to respond. However, on the 25th of March, a request was made by the Scottish government asking for a delay because of how much work they were having to do with the COVID-19 legislation and drafting. Martin Keatings put that to the crowdfunder supporters, asked what everyone thought, And the consensus was that, yeah, we understand that. So what Martin had proposed was to invoke a procedure called sisting, which essentially is putting a pause on proceedings, and normally that would last for 3 months. So that would have given us until, the back end of the summer. So we weren't expecting to hear any more until perhaps July or onwards. So the motion to sist was put forward, but there was no response. So it expired. So that kind of started the clock ticking again. So the next thing that happened was a motion coming from the Lord Advocate, who's the Scottish Government's legal guy, asking to sist for a period of 3 months. Now here's where it gets strange. Aidan O'Neill, our QC, opposed the motion, and they had proceedings in front of Lady Poole via teleconferencing. Lady Poole gave her ruling, which found in favour of Aidan O'Neill that the case was not now to be sisted and the case will now proceed. So this means that both the UK and the Scottish governments now have until the 20th of May to submit basic outlines of their arguments. This will then be followed by a standard adjustment period of 8 weeks where they can refine their arguments in the case. The case will then be in court, most likely within a month or so after that time. Now, the question I have learning this is, why would you rile up the Lord Advocate? He's likely to be on our side. But I can only assume that perhaps they didn't feel they were being taken seriously, the fact they didn't respond at all to the previous action. So what Martin has said is that, as with previous offers, we've extended our willingness to the other parties to be flexible on matters surrounding time, so long as they engage with us in good faith and there is a valid reason for doing so. But today we've sent a clear message that cooperation during this time is a two-way street and must be addressed as such. So there you go, a shot across the bows of the Scottish government, and presumably if they then come back and say the right things, then perhaps they will be more receptive to having a pause. But odd, just a bit odd. We've not heard anything from the UK government since their first get back in your box response back in February, so we'll just see what happens here. If you want to look up more about this, it's on the Crowd Justice site, which is www.crowdjustice.com, and the case is the Scottish people v the UK government on IndyRef 2.
Well, and I'm actually cutting up my toast with a knife because the tooth that I broke, which I had to repair myself, the filling came out, like the temporary filling came out, so I had to refill it. It's going to come out again.
Home dentistry?
Yeah. Well, you can't go to the dentist. They won't see you unless it's an absolute emergency. Because there was no pain in my tooth. It wasn't a tooth that had a filling anyway. It's one of the wee front, premolars, and it's just a corner that's chipped off it.
Did you go to Bateson's for the cement?
Yes. It was all very cloak and dagger. I had to go to the back of the dentist, and they said, come to the back door. So I went to the back door. I phoned them when I was at the back door, and one of the dental nurses ran out with a wee poly bag with some dental friends of ours got a friend's a dentist, and she said dental cement is like gold dust, you know. If you try any of the chemists, there's none left in the chemist, and when you go online, there's lots of it saying out of stock. So how's everyone this week then? Yeah.
I don't know, it feels odd, doesn't it? It feels like so much has happened in this last week, and then you just feel deflated because it's also the same old shit.
Yeah.
This runaway roller coaster in Westminster, whether it's Boris starting his shite last Sunday, which seems like an age ago, or the agriculture bill going through.
And still you get people denying that the Tories are not like fascist, disaster, capitalist. They're doing the best they can. No, they're not. I've got one friend though who said, because I said, he's bloody awful, and she said, no, he's not. She said, I absolutely hate him, but he's playing a blinder. He's doing exactly what they want done. And when you look at it from that point of view, yeah, Yeah, they're killing off the old and vulnerable. They're killing the poor.
The message as well was absolutely spot on for what they want. They've changed it from red to green outline. Alert, over to you, action.
Yeah, it's your fault if you catch it.
They know exactly what they're doing.
But that was an interesting comment that Neil had put on that post where there was the Daily Telegraph had done something quite scathing about Johnson. And I think somebody had commented the surprising thing is that they allowed this headline. And then Neil had put a comment saying, this is the Telegraph putting a shot across Johnson's bows and telling him to get back into line, which I thought, oh, that's very interesting.
It is interesting, but it's like the Sunday Times. It was the week before last when they put that really scathing piece across.
And the Daily Mail had put something critical of him as well.
Is that because they realise the writing's on the wall and they want to be on the correct side of the wall, so they're getting the knife in now? Like, they don't care who they support as long as they're seen to be on the right side, the more popular side.
But who do we think they're lining up instead? If there is this idea that the knife's out for Johnson, they're going to get rid of him. He's won them the election and now he's a liability, get rid of him. So who would go in there? I mean, Gove?
Neil's money's on Gove.
It's the same with Trump in a way. It's this populism that gets them elections. They manage to do post-truth media communications in such a way that people vote for them. But then once they're in, they're absolutely the wrong people for the job. And that's why you can see the government struggle, because they're trying to manage a crisis with three-word slogans. Yeah. I don't know anybody who would think of him as a prime minister, apart from him and probably his wife.
I think he'll get bored. I think he'll leave.
I think it's who's the next fall guy. That's all they're looking for. They're looking for somebody that they can get rid of, because one more prime minister is not going to resolve all this. It's gone too far the wrong way. It's too late.
And they've still got Brexit to come as well. So if it's a no-deal Brexit, maybe they'll leave Johnson there long enough that he can take the fall for Brexit and COVID.
The rumblings that he's not wanting to do it anymore. He's not enjoying it.
Poor Hancock, he's toast, isn't he?
So many of them should be toast. I mean, when you look at what's his name, Jenrick, how's he still there? We had to lose Catherine Calderwood, and rightly so, but he should have gone too. There's a whole host of them who should have gone. We're held to different standards. I get concerned as well. Some of the support groups that were set up locally are kind of moaning on that. And you understand people are needing a vent, but some people are just being fannies. Somebody said about the amount of fly tipping and was demanding that the tip be opened up and fly tippings happen. And you're thinking again, that's just people being selfish and inconsiderate. And the SNP should do something about this. And one guy came back, he went, I know it's terrible, isn't it? I've seen Nicola driving around with a white van and sopping litter. Just trying to make the point. But some people are so blinkered in their views. You know, I've been reading about cognitive dissonance, and that's what we're witnessing in front of us. These people, in the face of all this evidence, they still go, la.
Yeah, we've only been up here since August. And it's much along the same lines as then. I've been there going, is this just because I'm more exposed to social media now, or has Clacks always had a big population where their main concern when they wake up in the morning is, my bin? So... because I'm just thinking, oh my God, you know, and the fact that you have many bins means that there's even more things to get incensed about. I'm just there going, pandemic, bins. So,
well, the thing is, our bins have been getting taken away. I've had no...
The brilliance is considering that under the circumstances, they're even taking the brown bins, but...
And when I contacted them online to say, actually, along the tilted all those stretch of the cycle path, the list of bins there are just overfilling everywhere. That was sorted by the next day.
Well, you should see the box of shame in the back of my car. We'd been putting glass bottles, and I drove round to the glass recycler to see if I could fit any in, and it's just like it's growing bottles all the way around it. So I clinked home.
We need to go on Pinterest and see what you can do with wine bottles. You can make like garden lights with seedlings in them. You can plant them like upside down and make edging for your garden. That's given me an idea for a poem. And my friend had said about feeling so shameful that she's sitting at home comfortably in her house with her two kids, and all these people, these old vulnerable people in care homes, are suffering, and she's really feels in limbo. She's sitting there and wanting to do something but not able to do anything about it. So that's one form of shame. The other form of shame is like the number of wine bottles that we have. There's a whole load of shames, but people should be ashamed that they voted Tory as well. So I'll write a poem just called "The Shame in the Shire."
Has anybody seen the post Matilly tree by the clock? You've got the clock and you've got the T-junction, so you can go right to Dollar, or you can go left along to Tilly and Alba. The tree a bit further down has got loads of pom-poms on it. It's just been a community thing, just as a brighten up your local area. I'm not entirely sure how good it is for the birds.
But one of the other things I was thinking about, you know how they put a call out for volunteers, and then they did the same thing in Scotland, and they didn't get kind of the same responses they got down south. But my thinking was, lots of the communities had already started up their own support.
Yeah. One thing, when I was doing the Development Trust, I was astonished at how much volunteering goes on in Clackmannanshire. The network, the third sector interface folks, it's a huge amount of people already active. So again, that's probably, if you put out a call for volunteers, most of them are already out there.
Well, just wait till 1 o'clock, because Boris meets the 1922 committee at 1 o'clock. It's a virtual meeting with Brady, the head of the 1922. Boris has been told to have an assistant present with him in the room as a witness. So he's going to get a trousers, because they're not going. He's not going fast enough. He's not going in the right wing enough direction for all the people that want all the schools to open and businesses to go back. So I think it's almost like developing the same sort of breakup of the Tory party you saw through Brexit, where you had the hardliners and you had the sort of, the pro-Europeans to some extent. And it's the same sort of thing developing with us. You've got the hardliners on the one hand, and then you've got the others who say, no, it's too early.
I mean, I think it's absolutely urgent that we keep on having these discussions and talks about what is feasible and what is not feasible. And I can see what my friend's point was about stepping away from the fear and trying to really look at it constructively. But I think for me, it always keeps on coming down to the leadership that we have and the trust. If in the fact that the Prime Minister can make a pre-recorded speech that goes out on a Sunday without having actually gone through the proper processes, all the actual nitty-gritty, if you can call any speech by Prime Minister.
Having nitty-gritty.
But also, they're very keen on class divides as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
Interesting you say that, because I think class war as an issue is coming up back into focus again. This is something that you saw back in the day in the 80s, and it's kind of been under the boil, but now I think it's really surfacing again, especially when all your leading commentators on the telly and stuff are all privileged and highly paid.
And look who's dying as well from the virus. It's the lower.
Yeah,
and
it impacts on us, but it's condensing the message down to something that everyone can see. So
exactly, this is how it affects you.
Senga that does the stones and slates and things, she's got a slate that said billionaires want us back at work because it makes them billionaires.
Yeah.
So they're only concerned about their own wealth.
Did you see in the Nationals, the money that's been spent so far on the job retention scheme is 7% of the bank bailout. In 2008, 7%.
And the lowest interest rates ever. So, there's no problem in paying this off like that.
This is a drop in the ocean, folks. Don't you go on, no, if anyone's bringing up this, we can't afford it nonsense.
No, but I think what really upsets me is that it then gets dressed up in this, you're some kind of traitor, or you're not patriotic enough, or you are not doing your bit for your country if you're not supporting either the government or the government's latest stupid idea, or the folk that have voted.
Or the stupid government and their stupid idea.
You should be going out there and just grafting for nothing because it's your patriotic duty.
They're probably wrapped up in that war mentality still. Yeah. But the trouble is they keep losing that war. But every time they mention it, look at VE Day.
But that's what the people who vote in Boris, that's the generation. This will all be based on focus groups and polling. That's what they respond to. And you've got people going, hey, we managed in the war. And you think, well, it was over 20 years before you were born, dear. So how do you know?
Yeah, it seems just to me, they're still stuck in the empire mentality.
Yeah.
Empire, war, greatness. How fabulous are we?
It's going to be a reverse empire, though, because it's time for everyone to help themselves to the United Kingdom after all this.
The stark difference is everything about the Union Jack, everything about that is looking backwards and kind of basking in glory that no longer exists.
everything about Scotland is about looking forward to what could be and what the future could be. And for me, if I was going to choose something, am I going to choose living in the past, or am I going to choose making a future? I'm going to choose the second one.
Yeah.
I'm always going to choose making a future.
The Brexit thing is exactly that, though, isn't it? You know, you can stay looking backwards at the empire you wish you still had, or you can join with these other guys that we're no longer fighting and join together and come up with a peaceful future that moves us all forward.
There's huge swathes down south as well who didn't want Brexit. Political terms, it was a mohair between them, really and truly.
Yeah, and you've got a Tory government as well that was only voted in by
43%.
43%, thank you. So every time they stand up and say the British people want X, you're only talking about 43% of them.
Right, and that's only 43% of people who voted, because not everybody that was eligible to vote voted.
Yeah. The majority of people voted for something other than the Tories, if you put them all together.
Yeah.
They couldn't agree on what it was. But
people in England need to find an English solution to it. In Scotland, it's none of our business, apart from it does affect us.
It's entitlement, or the lack of entitlement. I think if you're in that particular demographic, and I would hope that you would vote, but generally you wouldn't vote, is because you literally don't think it's going to make any difference to you, because you see the difference further up the chain, you know, and you're excluded from all of that. So why vote? You know, and certainly the past 20 odd years of Labour, who should have been looking after those people, made it perfectly clear that they were not the least bit interested in those people. So why vote?
Just to bow down to our imperial masters.
In leadership courses, when I was at work, was this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the basic thing, you know, if you don't have it, that subsistence level of needs, food, shelter, safety, that's all anybody thinks about. And it's only once you've done that you can then move up. And the highest pinnacle of it is self-actualization. When all your material needs are met, that's the point when you can then create and be Shakespeare and, you know, be the best you can be. It's almost as if we've gone from operating at that pinnacle level. You can fly where you want, you can go on holidays, you can get any item delivered to your doorstep within 12 hours from anywhere in the world. And we've gone from that back to that subsistence level of where's the food coming from? You know, how do we stay safe?
But that's why the gig economy and and universal credit is so destructive, because it brings people back to that always worrying about where is my next meal going to come from? You know, how am I going to pay my next bill? You can't think outside what's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
So the gig economy has done.
Yeah, and if you're working 3 jobs just to make enough to keep food on the table, and sometimes not even doing that, you don't have time to organise and go to political meetings and read and
and then you get children that are living in these circumstances coming to school for an education, but you can't educate kids if they're hungry.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You've got to make sure that they're fed and are they safe?
This has been quite a big week for the Clacks WFI poetry show. Lorraine, one of the Clacks WFIs, who so far has been performing poems and is turning into a wonderfully passionate and articulate performer, has actually written her own first poem, so we couldn't let the occasion of a new poet being born in the world go without marking it in some way. So here, with appropriate fanfare, is Lorraine's first poem.
And now, an Indie Live Radio exclusive premiere, star performer Lorraine Sinclair's first original poem.
Poem is called Universe, Earth, Mother. Dear Universe, please this year send me a sign to help me find my soulmate for the sake of auld lang syne. But if no sign is shown, then I know I have to do this alone. For I have a mission and a goal. My mission is to secure for my country self-determination for the preservation of this great sovereign nation. My goal is to save the planet and not rely on coal eliminate toxins with greener lifestyles that nourish the soul. Dear Earth, please help Scotland be brave and take independence. The Earth's dying whilst politicians are lying. We must act now. Of that, there is no denying. Dear Mother Nature, please help us to understand and nourish you more. For you provide all nature's wondrous beauty that I truly do adore. It has surely got to be this generation's destiny to leave a healthier planet as our ancestral legacy for our children.
So there you are. You'll be able to tell your grandchildren that you heard the first ever performance of a new poet. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you all later. Bye now.
Indylive.